sa atong mga kabataan pinaagi sa kahanginan. Deped, Pagadian, Edukasyon sa Kabataan. Deped, Pagadian, Edukasyon sa Kabataan. Usa ka oras ka programa nga mabati matag alas 8 hangtod sa alas 9 sa buntag. Lunes hangtod sa adlaw nga Biyernes. Dinhi sa Radyo Sakto, Pagadian, DXMBFM sa Malindang Broadcasting Network Corporation. Deped, Pagadian, Edukasyon sa Kabataan.
Good morning na usab sa ato ang mga kaigsuonan diha sa kahanginan. Good morning usab sa ato ang mga magtutudlo nga naa karon sa ilahang mga eskwelahan. Good morning usab sa ato ang mga estudyante nga naminaw kanato karon pitsa 24 karon sa bulan sa January 2022. Lunes aron na usab ato ang pag-discuss tagaan na pag-ug importansya ang ato mga modules karong buntaga sa dili pa nato kani pagasugdan ato sang i-greet nato og mga good morning diha ang ato ang mga opisyalis sa City Deped pinanguluhan sa atong abtikon nga si Sir Danny V. Cordoba ang atong Schools Division Superintendent, si Ma'am Colleen Imoritza ang Assistant Schools Division Superintendent, ang atong duha ka chiefs ni Ma'am Peralta ug si Sir Isagani Kabahog. Good morning kaninyong tanan diha. So karong buntaga anyong makita diri mga igsuonan nga doon nakoy ako ang kauban diri no. Duha na po nato ka mga maabtikon nga education program supervisor sa mathematics ug sa science. So Sir Salim, good morning kanimo Sir Salim.
Yes sir Dino, good morning. Malipayong buntag na usab Sir Dino, ingon man malipayong buntag usab sa tanang naminaw ning atong programa sa kahanginan Deped Pagadian, Edukasyon sa Kabataan dinhi lamang sa 104.7 DXMB FM Malindang Broadcasting Network. Mga pinalanggan namo nga mga ginikanan ilabi na sa atong mga kabataan sa senior high school Mathematics 11, maayong buntag kaninyong tanan.
Okay.
Sir Den.
Maayong buntag usab sir mo sir no. So karong buntaga ato ana pong unyang katagaan og diskusyon ang module sa mathematics o sa science. So Sir Sal, unsa may atong unahon aning niya?
Mura nga unahon nato Sir Den ang mathematics Sir Den.
Okay. So tagaan nato karon og atong opening natong sa statement sir sa ato ang teacher broadcaster nato karong buntaga.
Yes Sir Den, salamat kaayo. Good morning again. Adlaw na usab nga Lunes para sa mathematics. Karong buntaga nausab kitay banggiitan nga radio teacher nga maghisgot sa grade 11 module 7. He is a senior high school teacher of Zamboanga del Sur National High School. He's already 5 years in the service. He is a graduate of Master of Science in Mathematics at MSU IIT. Completed academic requirements in MAED, Mathematics at St. Columban College, Pagadian City. Our radio teacher this morning, please help me welcome Teacher Leonardo G. Olvis.
Okay.
Good morning, Pagadian. Good morning, grade 11 students, parents, and to all our listeners. This is your Deped Pagadian, Edukasyon sa Kabataan, School on the Air, Paglambo sa Salabutan, Pinaagi sa Kahanginan. How are you today, grade 11 students, ug sa atong mga suking tigpaminaw? Kumusta man mong tanan? I know that you are all doing well. It is my pleasure to be with you this morning for another episode of School on the Air, grade 11 Pre-Calculus Instruction. I am Leonardo Olves, your friendly math teacher from Zamboanga del Sur National High School, Senior High School. Are you ready to learn pre-calculus this morning? But before we start, palihog kukuha sa inyong Module 7 sa pre-calculus nga subject, inyong ballpen o papel. Ang atong topic karon mao ang inverse trigonometric functions. Ug ang atong objective mao nga at the end of this broadcast, the grade 11 STEM students can illustrate the domain and range of the inverse trigonometric functions and evaluate an inverse trigonometric expressions. Let's have a review first on our previous topics on trigonometry. Do you still remember the trigonometric functions? Okay. The 6 trigonometric functions are sine, cosine, tangent, secant, cosecant, and cotangent. In Module 3, we defined these 6 trigonometric functions. That is, if we let theta be an angle in standard position, q of x and y, any point on the terminal side of theta, and r is equal to the square root of x squared plus y squared, which is greater than 0, then sine theta is equal to y over r, cosine theta is equal to x over r, tangent theta is equal to y over x, cosecant theta is equal to r over y, secant theta is equal to r over x, and cotangent theta is equal to x over y. Let us have the activity 1 in our module. We are asked to find the exact values of sine and cosine functions for some angle measures. We are going to write the indicated letter of the exact value into the box that corresponds to the trigonometric function. The first number, cosine of 0. Unsa man ang value sa cosine of 0? Very good, that is 1, and that corresponds to letter M. Next, sine of 3 pi over 4. Sine of 3 pi over 4 is equal to square root of 2 over 2, which corresponds to letter A. Next, cosine of pi over 3. That is equal to 1/2, and that corresponds to letter T. Sunod, sine of negative pi over 2. That is equal to -1, which is letter H. Sunod, sine of pi over 3. Sine of pi over 3 is equal to square root of 3 over 2, which is letter S. Sunod, cosine of negative pi over 4. Cosine of negative pi over 4 is equal to square root of 2 over 2, and that is letter A. Sunod, unsa man ang sine of 7 pi over 6? The sine of 7 pi over 6, that is equal to -1/2, and that corresponds to letter Y. Ang pinakaulahi, ang cosine of 7 pi over 4. Cosine of 7 pi over 4 is equal to, once again, square root of 2 over 2, which is letter A. Unsa man nga word ang atong naporma? Inyo bang natimanan? Very good. That is math saya. So, mo to atong na answer sa activity number 1. Now, let's proceed in activity number 2. Revisit right triangle ratios. Recall that trigonometric functions will sometimes be referred to as trigonometric ratios, since they can be taught as ratios of lengths of sides of right triangles. So, ang direction aning activity number 2, for each given right triangle, determine the corresponding trigonometric ratios that can be used involving angle theta and the given sides. Sa tan-awon ninyo sa given, ang number 1 is a right triangle nga with respect to theta, ang given ang opposite side o ang adjacent side. So kung inyong nahinumduman class sa inyong trigonometric before, kadong acronym nga SOHCAHTUA, which means that sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse, cosine is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, and tangent is equal to opposite over adjacent. So, katong opposite o ang adjacent refers to the side referring to that angle theta. So, sa number 1, kung atong basihan ang theta, ang given kay ang opposite ug ang adjacent. So, ang atong makuha nga ratio mao ang tangent theta. So, that is tangent theta is equal to 31/62. 31 ang opposite, 62 ang adjacent side. Sunod, sa number 2. So, once again, referring to angle theta, ang given kay ang opposite ug ang hypotenuse. So, kung opposite ug hypotenuse ang magamit nato is sin theta. So, ang ratio nga ato maporma mao ang sin theta is equal to 5/12. Sunod, sa number 3. Again, with respect sa angle theta, sa right triangle, ang given mao ang opposite o ang hypotenuse nga side. So, ang maporma nato gihapon mao ang sin theta is equal to 9/16. Og sa number 4, sa right triangle nga given, with respect to angle theta, ang given kay ang opposite o ang adjacent. So, 2 So, tangent theta is equal to 13/26. Kung atong balikan ang problem number 2 sa activity number 2, what is the measure of angle theta? We know relative to angle theta are the lengths of opposite and hypotenuse sides. So we can write sin theta is equal to opposite over hypotenuse, that is equal to 5/12. But this does not help us find the measure of angle theta. So must stack up ta. That is why we need the new function that takes side ratios and give angles. So unsa ni siya nga function? Mao ang inverse trigonometric functions. All the trigonometric functions that we consider are periodic over the entire domain. This means that all trigonometric functions are not one-to-one if we consider their whole domains, which implies that they do not have inverses over those sets. Kung ato na hinumduman class sa previous topics nato sa Gen Math, ang function kay naa siya inverse function kung katong given nga function kay one-to-one. But the domains of these functions can be restricted, so their inverses are functions. The restrictions will give us well-defined inverse trigonometric functions. If the domain of sine function is restricted from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2, the sine function takes on its full range on the values from negative 1 to positive 1, and it is 1-to-1. The sine function with the restricted domain is sometimes written as y is equal to sine x. The inverse of y is equal to sine x is called the inverse sine function, written as y is equal to sine inverse of x or y is equal to arc sine of x, and it is defined as follows. The inverse sine function y is equal to sine inverse of x if and only if sine of y is equal to x, where x is between negative 1 to positive 1, and ry also ranges from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. Take note that throughout the lesson, pwede na to mabaylo-baylo ang y is equal to sine inverse of x and y is equal to arc sine of x. Ang arc sine o ang sine inverse of x, parihara na silang duha. So let's have example number 1. Find the exact value of each expression. Letter A. Sine inverse of 1/2. If we let theta be equal to sine inverse of 1/2, this is equivalent to sine theta is equal to 1/2. This means that we are looking for the number theta in the closed interval negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2, whose sine is equal to 1/2. So kano sa man 1/2 ang sine theta? Unsa man angle? Unsa may measure ni angle theta? So we get theta is equal to pi over 6. Thus, we have sine inverse of 1/2 is equal to pi over 6. Letter B. What is arcsine of 0 or sine inverse of 0? So, kanus aman ma-0 si sine. So, ma-0 si sine kung ang theta nato is also equal to 0. So, where 0 is in the closed interval negative pi over 2 and positive pi over 2. Therefore, arcsine of 0 is equal to 0. Letter C, arcsine of negative 1. Class, kanus aman ma negative 1 ang sine. So, ang arcsine of negative 1 is equal to negative pi over 2 because sine of negative pi over 2 is equal to negative 1. O kaning negative pi over 2 na bilong sa closed interval negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. As emphasized in the last example, as long as x is between negative 1 to positive 1, sine inverse of x, that is number y, is in the closed interval negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2, such that sine y is equal to x. If the absolute value of x is greater than 1, then sine inverse of x is not defined in the R. We sometimes find the exact value of sine inverse of x, that is, we find the value in terms of theta, but if no such special angle exists, then we leave it in the form of sine inverse of x. Aduna ba kamoy pangutana? I hope everything is clear about inverse sine function. Now, padulong ta sa cosine function. If the domain of cosine function y is equal to cosine of x is restricted to 0 to pi, the cosine takes on its full range of values and it is also 1 to 1. So the cosine function with this restricted domain is written as y is equal to cosine of x and has inverse cosine function. Y is equal to cosine inverse of x, or y is equal to arc cosine x. So we define this cosine inverse function as y is equal to cosine inverse of x if and only if cosine of y is equal to x whenever our x is between from negative 1 to positive 1 and our y is also between 0 to pi. So let's have example number 3 sa ato ang module. Find the exact value of each expression. So tanawan na to sa number 1. Letter A. What is cosine inverse of 0? Kanus aman ma 0 si cosine. So nahibala na to nga ang cosine ma 0 sa 90 degrees. So which means that cosine inverse of 0 is equal to pi over 2 because cosine of pi over 2 is equal to 0 and pi over 2 is in our range. Letter B. Arc cos of negative square root of 3 over 2. Unsa may value sa theta para ang cosine nato is equal to negative square root of 3 over 2. Kanus man ni siya mahitabo? So, theta must be equal to 5 pi over 6 because cosine of 5 pi over 6 is equal to negative of square root of 3 over 2, which is in the second quadrant. Kay ang cosine nato ma-negative siya sa second and third quadrant. So mao to siya ang inverse cosine function. Now let's proceed to the inverse tangent function. The inverse tangent function is similarly defined as inverse sine and inverse cosine functions. So y is equal to tangent inverse of x, or y is equals to arctan of x if and only if tangent of y is equal to x, where our x is the set of all real numbers and our y is between from negative pi over 2 and to positive pi over 2. So ang ato ang domain is the set of all real numbers pero ang atong range is only between from negative pi over 2 to positive pi over 2. Now let's have example number 4. Find the exact value of each expression. Letter A. Tangent inverse of 1. Kano saan man ma-equal to 1 ang tangent? So, ma-equal to 1 lang siya kung ang theta nato is equal to 45 or pi over 4. Therefore, tangent inverse of 1 is equal to pi over 4. So, ang pi over 4 na bilong dito sa ato ang range. Sunod, letter B. Arctan is equal to negative square root of 3. Kano saan man ma-square root of 3 ang ato ang tangent? Unsa may value sa ato ang angle? So, may equal lang siya to square root of 3 kung ang theta na to is equal to negative pi over 3. So, arctan of negative square root of 3 is equal to negative of pi over 3. Letter C. What is tangent of tangent inverse of negative pi over 2? So, class, kung katubitang sa ato ang gen math, katong the inverse of the inverse, mubalik siya sa original. So therefore, kaning letter C, tangent of tangent inverse of negative pi over 2 is just equal to negative 5 over 2. Naba mo'y pangutana? I hope you understand everything about sine, inverse, and inverse cosine and inverse tangent function. So let's proceed to the next activity in our module. The activity number 3. Determine the measure of angle in the right triangle by applying the inverse trigonometric functions. So, na din ay example. With respect to angle theta, ang given kay ang opposite side o ang hypotenuse side. So, sa kanisa nga triangle, given nga triangle, sine theta is equal to 5 over 12. So, sine inverse of sine theta is equal to sine inverse of 5 over 12, which will give us theta is equal to approximately equal to 24.62. Sa kanina panahon class, dinhi na ta mo gamit og calculator. Kadto bitong second function sa button sa inyong calculator, second function of sine, mo to siya ang sine inverse. So diha na to magamit ang calculator og ma-approximate dayon na to ang value sa theta. So let's have example ay number 1 sa atong activity number 3. So ang given nga sides with respect to the angle theta is the opposite side and the adjacent side. So ang ato ang ratio nga magamit dinhi is tangent theta. So tangent theta, which is equal to the opposite side over the adjacent side, is equal to 31 over 62. So tangent theta kung atong i-reduce, that is equal to 1/2. So, saan na ito paggamit sa calculator? I-second function na to, then tusloko na to itong tangent nga button. So, mo na to siya ang tangent inverse. So, ang mo tunga sa display sa ato ang calculator, mo ang tangent inverse of 31 over 62. Kung ato ang equal na dayon ang calculator, that is approximately equal to 26.57 degrees. So let's proceed to number 2. Again, with respect to theta, that is equal to ang given nga side sa atong right triangle kay ang opposite o ang adjacent. So mo lang gihapon nato ang magamit nga ratio, ang tangent theta. So in this case, tangent theta is equal to 13 over 26, which is again, if kung atong i-reduce, that is just again equal to 1/2. So theta is equal to tangent inverse of 1/2 is equal to approximately equal to 26.57 degrees. So sa number 3, with respect to theta, given na karon kay pareha lang gihapon ang opposite ug ang adjacent nga side. So once again, using the tangent nga ratio, tangent theta is equal to opposite over adjacent is equal to 15 over 25. By the way, class, kaning 15 ug 25 diri naani siya sa ato ang given nga right triangle. Mao na sila ang measure sa side sa right triangle. So 15 corresponds to the opposite side, 25 corresponds to the adjacent side with respect to theta. So tangent inverse is equal to 15 over 25. Kung i-reduce na to, tangent theta is equal to 3 over 5, which means that theta is equal to tangent inverse of 15 over 25 is equal to approximately 30.96 degrees. I hope nasabtan ninyong atong topic karon. So I guess, ready na o excited na kaayo mo nga mo answer sa assessment sa ato ang module. Since wala naman tayo oras, my dear grade 11 STEM students, I hope I was able to add up a little worthwhile information to your learning. It was indeed a very fulfilling learning experience with you in Deped, Pagadian City, School on the Air. This is again your friendly math teacher saying, never stop learning because life never stop teaching. God bless everyone and keep safe.
Okay, atong nadungong si Sir, kisa ganito, Sir?
Si Sir Leonardo Olves.
Okay, asa to nga eskwelahan kasi ni Sir?
Isa siya sa mga magtutudlo diha sa Sambuanga National High School, Senior High School, Sir.
Okay, kay atong nakita dito sa nadungog ginato nga mga tangent. Yeah, magbag-o lang tag-istorya, Sir, atong imuhang giingon ng password. Usa gyud ng password?
Kuan siya kanang so ka tuwa. Sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. Ang ka na po is cosine equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Then ang tuwa, tangent equals opposite over adjacent.
Okay, so
kumbaga mo ay password, sir.
oo, makalibog gina, Sir Rocco, kay ug dili gid mo ma-identify asa nga angle ang function dili gid pwede.
Dili masayop na gyud siya. Wrong gyud ang answer.
So, sa may katambag nimo ana, Sir, sa ato ang mga kaigalaan.
Sa ato ang mga estudyante, kinanglan na presence of mind, sir. Kay ug masayop ang given, pag identify nimo sa given, nga ang formula nga imong gigamit, dili mao, masayop gyud siya din.
Ay kaning subject ka, Sir. Sa ating calculus ba?
Yes, sir. Calculus na siya, sir. Okay na siya, sir, kay pre-calculus, pero in college na, sir, ang calculus, mawagid na, hinungdan, sir, ang calculus nga, medyo wala gid ko ma-appeal sa listahan sa mga honors.
Patay na, Sir.
Pero pag-graduate ako sa Kwansan, naka-receive lang yun kong awards with honor, sir.
Okay, kaya, Sir.
Gumikan ang calculus kay sa unang panahon, sir, sa SMC, sa among time, ang major in math, appeal gyud siya sa engineering. Wala na, sir, nga magkatawa mi basta calculus na kanang integral o differential calculus sa unang panahon kay ko naana po ning lesson nga pinaka nindot
Paborito.
paborito nga subject kay basta makapangilamos tag way tubig, sir.
Kanalaga ng algebra na, Sir, mas lisod na nang naa. Kaya daghan ang gimungutan ng may function ng mamaligya ra kuha ni kutanon. At any rate, mga kaigalaan, atong nadunggan katong usa ka pag-iitan nga maestro gino.
Yes, sir.
Sa senior high school nga nag-discuss sa mga calculus. So, makikita pakapili ni Sir Uyab, no?
Sir, banggiitan to, sir, nga maestro sa senior high school diha sa Sambuanga National High School, sir.
Okay. So, karong buntaga, ato na usab nga tagaan higayon si Mamila para sa ato ang science. Mamil. Good morning, Mamil.
Good morning, Sir Dean. Sir Cam, good morning.
Yes, Mamel. Good morning, Mamel.
It's Monday morning again. It's time for Science and Math. So, may buntag sa tanan nga naminaw karon sa ato ang programa, Deped, Pagadian, EDUKASYON sa Kabataan. Mayong buntag usab sa atong mga grade 7 students kay sila nga atong ginatutukan karon. Parents and all teachers, despite the overwhelming consequences of pandemic, ani gihapon ta karon serving for our clientele which are our students. Karon aduna kitay duha ka very dynamic and competent science teacher discussion, Sir Dean and Sir Kem. We have with us Mr. Mateo Sabasales, Master Teacher 2 of Sambusur National High School, and Miss Bernadine Lamberang, Teacher 3 of Sambusur National High School also, to discuss about Grade 7 Science Quarter 3. Our competency is about the color intensity of light. So it is expected that our students will be able to explain the color and intensity of light in terms of wavelength. So, Sir Dean.
Okay. So, technician, take it away.
Good morning, grade 7 students. This is your Deped Pagadian City School on the Air. We are happy to be with you in this learning session. I'm Teacher Bernadine R. Lamberang from the Zamboanga del Sur National High School, Maine, your teacher guide for today.
Is the intensity of light measurable? And lastly, what does it mean when we say electromagnetic spectrum? Through this radio program, I know that you can easily answer these questions in your module. Are you ready?
Students, kindly open your booklet in Science Quarter 3, Module 5, Activity Number 1, Getting to Know Newton. There you can read the story of Newton, how he discovered the different colors. Newton started experimenting with his celebrated phenomenon of colors. In 1660s, people thought that color was a mixture of light and darkness. Hooke was a proponent of this theory of color and had a scale that went from white, meaning it has the presence of pure light without darkness, then to brilliant red, which was pure light with the least amount of darkness added to it, then to dull blue, which has greater darkness and the least amount of white light. The last is the scale is black, which was the complete absence of light. Newton realizes this theory was false. Ano kaya ang ginawa ni Newton? Newton made an experiment and it is become known as his crucial experiment. He used a hole in his shutter to direct a beam of sunlight into his room and refracted this beam using a prism. What is a prism? It is a transparent optical element with flat, polished surfaces that refract light. The shape is like a pyramid that is made up of clear glass. He was able to see the spectrum of colors formed, and then used another prism to refract the separated rays of colors back into a ray of white light. This proved that light is made up of colors. The prism allows them to be seen. Newton coined the phrase the color spectrum, and he chose to split the spectrum into the 7 colors we know today. Are you familiar with the acronym Roy G. Biv in your elementary? What does each letter stands for? R stands for red. O for orange. Y for yellow. Green. G for green. B for blue. I for indigo. And V for violet. Although the spectrum is continuous, with no boundaries between each individual color. Have you seen a rainbow in the sky? The colors are continuous from one to another. A rainbow proves that colors coming from the light of the sun that is refracted in water droplets to different wavelengths displays the colors. He was able to show that each color has its angle of refraction. He used this to prove that an object's color is a property of the light refracting of it, rather than something inherent within the object itself. After hearing this, let us answer activity number 1.
Okay, mauni ang mga questions sa activity number 1, Teacher Adin. Number 1, how did people in 1660s believe colors were created? Unsa ka ang answer ni Teacher Adin?
Okay, people believe that color was a mixture of light and darkness.
Okay, mao ba pud na inyong answer mga students? Very good. For question number 2, what did Newton use to create a beam of light? What do you think, students?
I think Newton used a hole in his shutter to direct a beam of sunlight into his room.
Correct. So for question number 3, why was Newton's experiment known as crucial?
It was crucial because he is able to see the spectrum of colors formed and prove that light is made up of colors, just like what had been shown in his experimental setup nga makita nato sa illustration na sa ibabaw sa page 2.
Okay. Proceed to question number 4. What did he prove about how we see an object's color?
He was able to show that each color has its angle of refraction. He used this to prove that an object's color is a property of the light refracting of it. Meaning to say, ang color jud ay gikan sa light, nganing bend into different angles. Tan-awa gani ninyo sa page 3. Makita ninyo diha sa ubos nga picture that light passed through a prism separates white light into its component colors.
Okay. So sa question number 5, if you were Isaac Newton, how would you caption or label the sketch light source or artificial light source? Write your answers on the table. I'll give you a few minutes to answer that. Okay, time's up. Let's check your answer. Teacher Dean, unsa kaha ang mga natural source of light?
Okay, we have star, sun, and lightning.
That's correct. How about artificial source of light?
We have here candle, fire, flashlight, lamp, light bulb, glow stick, TV, red hot iron, and burning coal.
Correct. I hope everybody got it right. So this time, we want you to turn to page 3. So the brightness of the light or kahayag sa suga depends on the source and the distance from the source. Just like carrying a flashlight. Kung duol ka sa flashlight, mas hayag. Kung layo ka sa flashlight, magkadulom ang siga sa flashlight. Brightness, however, is qualitative and is dependent on the person's perception. Depende kani sa atong pag-describe kung hayag ba o dili. Pero pwede na to i-measure ang kakusog sa kahayag or ang intensity of light. Quantitatively, brightness can be expressed as luminous intensity with a unit known as candela. Take a look at figure 1. It is an improvised photometer setup. Inyo makita na ang bulb nga gimarkahan og number 1 mas layo sa improvised photometer kaysa sa kandela nga gimarkahan og number 2. Pero naghatag sila og parehong nga RGB. So the secondary sa pigment mo yield kini siya og black. So mga bata, napabay another properties of light aside from intensity and dispersion? Teacher Adin, unsa kaha ang other properties of light?
I think nakita nako diha sa picture sa page 3 na mi-bend ang colors into different angles. The bending of light as it passed through a different medium is called refraction.
That's a very good observation, Teacher Adin. Aside from Sir Isaac Newton, Christian Huygens believed that light behaves like a particle. But Louis de Broglie believed that light has dual nature. He explained that light can be a particle and can also be a wave. So James Clerk Maxwell proposed the electromagnetic theory of light. There are different forms of electromagnetic waves arranged according to frequency and wavelength. This is what we call electromagnetic spectrum. So since wave carries energy, each electromagnetic wave carries different level of energy. Kindly refer to electromagnetic spectrum. What are the 7 electromagnetic waves? Can you name it?
Okay, if we're going to look at the electromagnetic spectrum, from left going to right, we have radio wave, microwave, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet rays, X-rays, and gamma rays.
That's right. In the electromagnetic spectrum, which electromagnetic wave is visible to the naked eye? Correct, the one in the middle. And what is it? The visible light, or what we call the white light. The rest cannot be seen by our naked eye. It's because the wavelength is either too long or too short. The color that we see is a result of which wavelength are reflected back to our eyes. See the picture at the bottom of page 4. Which color has the shortest wavelength? That's correct, violet. Which has the longest wavelength? Correct, red. As you can see in the color spectrum from violet going down to red, the wavelength is increasing from 400 nanometers to 665 nanometers. At this point, you're going to construct a spectrum wheel in activity 3. My spectrum wheel. Read the activity carefully and follow the instructions in part 1. You can do your output after our radio program. Meanwhile, we will try to guide you on how to find the values of energy, frequency, and wavelength of the different colors of light. Upon putting the spectrum wheel on the second wheel, align the small window to the specific color. For example, red. The larger window will give the value of frequency expressed in terms of THz or terahertz, followed by the wavelength expressed in nm, or that is what we call nanometer. And lastly, energy carried by the waves expressed in EV or electron volt. Going back to our example red, the frequency is 422 terahertz. Wavelength is 700 nanometer and energy is 1.77 electron volt. Now it's your turn. Locate color violet in the spectrum wheel. What is the frequency, the energy, and the wavelength of violet?
Okay, if you're going to refer, the answer can be found in the spectrum wheel. And we can see that violet has the frequency which has an equivalent to 744 terahertz, while the wavelength is 400 nanometer, and the energy is 2.95 electron volt. What have you noticed on the relationship between frequency and wavelength?
Teacher Adin, I have noticed that the greater the frequency, the shorter the wavelength. Meaning, frequency and wavelength has inverse relationship with each other. Then, another pattern is with regard to energy and wavelength. They also are inversely related with each other. While in terms of frequency and energy, they are directly proportional. Meaning, as the frequency increases, the energy also increases. Salamat, Teacher Adin, sa nindot kaayo nga pagtulunan. This time, we would like to do the same with the rest of the, we would like you to do the same with the rest of the colors.
Okay, now my dear, I hope you learned a lot while enjoying the lesson. You still have other activities in the module to further enhance your knowledge. Please continue answering the remaining activities and assessment. If you have difficulty, feel free to contact your teacher to help you. It was fun working with you in accomplishing the module. This has been Teacher Adin. Thank you so much for the next radio lesson. It's such a pleasure to be with you, Sir Matt. Thank you for being with us.
Just a little important reminder, students. Now that we are experiencing a global health emergency brought by COVID-19 pandemic, it is just right to take utmost care of our health. Practice self-care at the same time rekindle our commitment to take good care of our studies. Once again, this is your friendly science teacher, Mr. Matthew T. Sabasales. This is Deped, Pagadian City, School on the Air. Good day, everyone.
Okay, ato ginadunggan si Sir Matt Sabasales o katong iyang partner. Mamil, isa to yung partner gani Mamil?
Si Teacher 3 to siya, sir, si Miss Bernadine Lamberang of Sambusor National High School.
Mamil, kung sa'yo itong ika-istorya ang ilang lesson karon kami. Nindot mo dyan kay Paminahan all about wavelength.
Yeah, kinahanglan jud ko nga very interesting ang ilahang topic. But I really need review gyud. Kinahanglan jud ko mo review kay dili ta makakuan sa katong mga kani di ay mag-combine di ay taaning primary colors mo dai nimo gawas ning mga secondary colors, and kaning mga secondary colors kung i-combine nato naa na pud siya lain nga mga kwan. Very interesting, so makahibalo gyud ta unsay mga kwan. So I really need to review this. Siguro magpa-tutor ko ni Sir Matt o ni Miss Bernadine Lamberang. Kay they really explained it very well.
So, atong nadunggan mo katong gitawag nila mga colors, kung atong i-review gyud og balik, no, kay katong iyang giingon white light. So, pasabot to nga ang tanan nga colors, kung i-absorb, all the colors are absorbed. Ang manghitabo, white light.
White
no?
siya, oh.
Oo.
So amazing kaayo, sir, no? Nga ingana di ay ang nature nga mo kuan.
Maayo kay pagka-discuss at pagtukan nila. So, mga higala, atong oras karon is 9:03 na. So, siguro, akong pangayoan karon ang ato ang mga parting statement. Unahon ako si Sir Salim.
Yes, Sir Dino. Salamat kay Sir Dino. To our avid listeners and viewers of Malindang Network Facebook page, who are always with us, particularly of our program, Deped Pagadian, Edukasyon sa Kabataan, especially our mathematics senior high school students. Thank you very much of giving yourselves a chance to learn on the air. Salamat kaayo sa pagpaminaw ni Teacher Leonardo G. Olvis. I hope you learned a lot this morning from his discussions on the air. Sa inyong tanan, daghang kayong salamat. Salamat po sa atoang technician, si Sir Borge Orion. I always say, observe IATF and DOH protocols wherever you are. May God bless us. Thank you.
Okay. Ma'am Mil?
First and foremost, magpasalamat ako ni Teacher Math and Teacher Nadine for the lesson that they presented today. Ug sa tanan nga naminaw karon, daghan kayong salamat sa inyong paghatag og panahon nga makapaminaw sa atong duha ka mga teacher discussants nga si Sir Matt and Miss Nadine. Then to all our teachers, I hope you invite all your students to listen this program. Deped Pagadian, Edukasyon sa Kabataan, diri sa 104.7 Malindang Broadcasting Network. Every Monday ang Science and ang Math. And then, watch and subscribe to Malindang Broadcasting Network YouTube channel for you to always be notified all of our lessons on the air. To everyone, thank you very much. Until next Monday again, keep safe.
Okay. Sa ngalan na usab sa among Schools Division Superintendent Sir Danny B. Cordoba o sa Dibok Pwersa sa Division of Pagadian City, daghang salamat sa iyong pagpaminaw o ginawaton ta usab nga ayaw kanyo pagpakyas pagdial sa inyong mga radio diri sa 104.7 Malindang Broadcasting Network. Daghang salamat sa iyong paminaw and good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Hanap mo ba'y latest na balita? Iba't ibang uri ng musika. Buong araw, gabi man o umaga, magbibigay ng buhay at saya. Halika na, tayo sama-sama, himukin na ang bawat isa. Sa balita at mga musika, Malindang Broadcasting Network, andito na. Preskong balita, dito mo maririnig. Musikang sa puso'y nagpapaindak at aantig. Kapit kamay, tayo ay sabay-sabay. Sa dial ng radyo, isa tayo. Matatag na bayan, masigasig na mamamayan. Malindang Broadcasting, sama-samang tutukan. Buong Mindanao, tayo ay magdiwang. Bigyang kulay ang kinabukasan. Matatag na bayan, masigasig na mamamayan. Malindang Broadcasting, sama-samang tutukan. Buong Mindanao, tayo ay magdiwang. Bigyang kulay ang kinabukasan. Malindang Broadcasting Network, paborito ng bayan.